Welcome to Integrated Wellbeing YouTube channel and podcast for people in grief and the professionals who serve them. We provide education, inspiration, and practical tools by interviewing those bereaved by loss, mental health professionals, and grief specialists. Integrated Wellbeing Institute seeks to awaken the griever to their inner peace through the guidance of their body. And today I am absolutely delighted to introduce to you Paul Denniston, founder of Grief Yoga, which blends many forms of yoga, movement, and sound. So welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Georgena. Good to be here.
It's wonderful to have you. And the reason that I chose to invite Paul at this particular time in this YouTube series and podcast is that what we know is grief is that internal state of deep, dark, anguished feelings, thoughts, and beliefs that live in the body. We can't think our way through grief. And Paul began this journey in his own grief. And so, Paul, do you want to tell us how grief yoga came to be, please?
Absolutely. Well, I got to tell you, I'm shocked for myself that I approached a practice that focuses both on grief and both on yoga. Growing up, the son of a Southern Baptist minister that was taught that yoga was a sin, or yoga wasn't, something that was to be done. And also that grief was a sign of weakness and shouldn't be shared and expressed. It's amazing to see where your life leads. I guess as a sensitive kid growing up in Texas and not having, the models of like how to grieve or how to express anger, I bottled a lot up. I suppressed a lot. And so I would numb it out with food when I was little, and I was a heavy little kid that definitely didn't want to do any type of exercising because I was so insecure about my body. And I would suppress it, and I would notice how, my mother would isolate when she was feeling sad. I would see my father explode with anger like a boiling teapot at times. So, feeling emotions was really a challenging thing, but I could see how it really got suppressed. But I just kind of numbed out to it. And later from food, it went to addiction and, alcohol and drugs and sex. And I think really what it was about for me was it was hard to be in the sadness. It was hard to know what to do with the anger. And so literally what I was doing was I kind of was judging emotions. These are good emotions and these are bad emotions. But what I started to recognize was that if I didn't feel the sadness or if I didn't feel the anger, it started to get stuck within me. The sadness shifted to depression. The anger, because it wasn't being released, turned inward, and I was being harder on myself than anybody else was. And so finally, it's like when I was starting to seek out these things that could numb it out, through addiction, that no longer started to work. So I was like, something needs to shift and change. Started going to a yoga class just because I was trying to find some peace. And what it found that I started to tap into was, it was like, as I started to become centered, it's like, oh, that means you have to be present to these challenging emotions beneath the surface. And I was learning how to be with it and to move with it. And I was also dealing with the anticipatory loss of both watching my sister slowly begin to die from cancer. And, I started to become a yoga teacher and learn many different modalities of yoga. But I was also touring with David Kessler, a grief expert, and I would see and listen to therapists about where people were getting stuck within grief and loss. And I come from a movement and choreography background. And so I started to explore the concept of what if this move, inspired from movement in yoga, was based on this particular part of where we get stuck within grief and loss. Maybe this focuses on regret, or maybe this focuses on self-regulating and finding safety. Maybe this focuses on anger. And I started to develop that. But then I had a traumatic accident which forced me to slow down and really take a look at also, how I was using addiction to not really go there. And so within the traumatic fall, it stopped me in my tracks. I decided to choose a new path, and I started to become sober, which for me at this point, it's been 10 years. And I started to really dive deep into saying, let's do something with this practice that can not deny grief or anger or pain. I'm not a fan of bypassing emotions, but actually channeled them out in an empowering way that led to the other side, which I think in some ways, if you go through it and leads you to the other side, what's over on the other side, perhaps it's more meaning, more love, more grace, more gratitude, and to kind of like find that journey from darkness to light that I was experiencing for myself, and then how to begin to guide others within that experience too.
Thank you. And congratulations on the 10 years of sobriety.
Thank you.
That's something certainly to celebrate.
And I got to tell you, when coming from a place as you get sober, and then you're like, you have to grieve the life that you had before. You have to grieve, maybe my life didn't happen the way that I wanted. You have to even grieve in some ways this friend, which was drugs that I was using, isn't really working out in that way. You have to deal with the shame and the guilt that happens beneath the surface. So there is, but here's the crazy thing, is that I learned in that time period that if I actually go there, instead of running away from it, if I actually give the space for all of these challenging emotions to breathe, also what could be on the other side of it is happiness or peace. And it was like, you can't deny the other in order to get there. So because I found that when in denying it, there was a little bit of a disassociation and a depression. So in some ways, in this colorful little human life that we're living, we got to honor all of these emotions. We got to kind of because they get stuck in our body. We're having this human experience. So how can we move with it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what I really appreciated is the fact that David Kessler and Paul Denniston wrote Healing Through Yoga.
Yes, it was actually me, but David was definitely an inspiration.
Okay, he wrote the foreword.
He wrote the foreword, but it is my book.
Okay.
It took a lot of work to do it, so I got to acknowledge that is my book, but he did write the foreword. You are correct.
Yes. And what I love about this book is that it has not only the story of how all of this happened, it's got these wonderful, wonderful pictures of Paul demonstrating the poses. Mm-hmm. And what I loved from page 18 in your book is, I knew that unresolved grief causes a darkness within our life and heart. You just shared that with us.
I did.
But grief yoga is a sacred ritual to help turn the light back on. And that's what you described, as you described the journey through the darkness to the other side. And look what's waiting, a rich, real life.
Yeah. And that every day we might have to go through a little bit of just that in itself. I mean, perhaps the darkness within our mind, or darkness within situations and circumstances, and how can we kind of go through that and kind of move through it. Maybe even seasons within our life where we have to kind of like be within that darkness and and to kind of, my hope was, though, was to honor those challenging dark emotions, but for it to be a little bit of a lighthouse, a beacon to say, we can go through the darkness, and there can be something on the other side that's maybe helps us to see, even through the grief, we recognize what's important in our life, and helps us to see and tap into, let me focus on more things that I recognize are important in my life. And I think that's how grief can be our teacher, if we awaken to that.
Yes. When we realize that grief can be our teacher and slow down and listen to it, as you have done and demonstrated, there's that wisdom that's there.
Grief is a bitch of a teacher too.
It is. Nobody wants it.
Nobody wants that teacher.
No.
Oh my God. Who wants that teacher? Oof.
Exactly. My son Vincent said to me, Paul, Mom, why did you choose to go out and speak about grief? I said, Vincent, I didn't. Grief chose me. And that is the truth for so many of us.
And why did it choose you?
It chose me. This topic chose me so that I could show up and say, hey, wait a minute. When 5 people in your family die in less than 4 years, there's much to be learned. We can navigate the ocean of emotion. Grief brings up the deepest, darkest parts of ourselves, longing to be heard and healed. I'm not the same person I was when I began in 1994 with my brother Mark's death, and certainly not as I moved through the grief of my son in 1998. And so grief was, we've heard this before. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. It is our opportunity to move through. Absolutely.
And I think that grief is also your teacher, because you chose to love. And that's kind of part of the price of it, isn't it? And I can't imagine not living this life without loving. That doesn't feel like it would resonate with me. And so I have to learn that grief and love are a package deal. And if I don't honor sometimes that grief, then it kind of prohibits the love for really flowing too.
I'm very curious. You said on page 21, yoga can be a saving grace to help deal with grief and loss. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Well, it was my saving grace. Why? I believe the heart of what yoga is about is compassion. And I think having compassion within grief is very important. It was my saving grace because it allowed me to slow down. It allowed me to move from the mind, the very, very busy monkey mind that's up there, and to deepen the breath and to get into the body. Yoga means union, connection. And when we are experiencing grief, how normal it is to feel that sense of disconnection. And so within this movement experience, now also I just want to say, there's lots of different forms of yoga. Sometimes if someone tried yoga and it was their power yoga and that's like, this is not for me, and some people it really resonates. So it's also recognizing that there are many different flavors you can choose from. But in the essence of what yoga is about, mind, body, and spirit, how can we begin to quiet the mind, explore and move with the sensations within our body to lift the spirit? And for me, that has been a saving grace in my life.
Thank you. And the other quote on that page, actually, Paul, that really touched me is grief yoga is an opportunity to release sadness and anger without expectation or judgment. And I just loved that, because how many of us are in grief judging ourselves or expecting ourselves to be a certain way, and we're not.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of it's also just about acceptance, acceptance of what is. And maybe the acceptance is right now in this time in my life, I am sad, I am angry. And part of that is to when we in the healing process, having that awareness and acceptance of it actually is our step and our moving through with it if we allow it. So I just want to say that sadness and anger are part of these life experiences. And what if I accepted it, moved it through? Then maybe it can open the door for other things too. Maybe that's peace, maybe that's gratitude, maybe that's play, maybe that's joy. I think a lot of this practice is about getting curious about, what do you suppress? Do you suppress sadness? Do you suppress anger? Do you suppress joy? What is it that you suppress within your life and within your body? And this particular practice focuses on using yoga, movement, breath, and sound to release the pain and struggle, to connect to more empowerment and love. That is the core mission.
And it's so interesting to hear you say what you were just saying, because by that slowing down, we come back to ourselves.
Yes. Or come back to the chaos within.
Yes.
A lot of times that's what happens.
It is. And what I also appreciated about what you just said was when we ask and explore with curiosity, because curiosity shifts the way we look at things, in my experience.
One of my things that I particularly am working on in my life, growing from a judgmental, I grew up from a very judgmental space, right? Judged emotions, Southern Baptist religious, judgmental space. Hello.
Yeah.
And so it's one of the things that I have to work through in my mind. I'm judging, myself, I'm judging others. Most of the time, I got to tell you, a lot of the times it's judgment of self that really is what I'm experiencing and going through. But what you're talking about within curiosity, that is kind of the shift that can happen there, to become aware and accept where the judgment's coming from. A lot of the times, I think that when we are going through grief and trauma, I think that we judge and become harder on ourselves than anybody else is, at least that's from my experience, and start to get curious about it. It can really begin to shift it. Maybe it's curious about, why am I being so hard on myself? Why am I being so hard on others? Maybe it's getting curious about, where does this live within the body? And that's actually, in some ways, that gets me excited, because that's where we can begin to move with it and through it.
And then there's the wonderful metaphors of the body. What am I shouldering? The pain in my neck, all those things.
I got the weight of the world on my shoulders.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. So who is grief yoga for, Paul? Because in your book, you talk about, so many different people with so many different losses that have experienced this. So, tell us more.
Grief yoga is about transformation. And so grief yoga is for anybody who is experiencing struggle or pain and would like to shift it. That's really what it's for. That's who it's for. Sometimes once we shift and release the pain and the struggle, we get curious of what's beneath the surface. Sometimes that can be grief. Sometimes that can be anger. Sometimes that can be peace and joy. But it's really for someone who's like, I've got pain and struggle and stress, and I'm wanting to have a shift. I'm wanting to release some of this pain and struggle. That's what it's about. It was interesting. I started off this practice focusing on grief, but then it just became a little bit more underneath the surface. It's like, let's just focus on the pain, the anxiety, whatever it is that's causing you struggle.
Yes.
And let's transform that. Let's shift that. Let's not
Mm-hmm.
bypass that, but let's actually channel that. And that's part of what this work is about from a safe way. It's like, how can we use that as fuel that can begin to lighten our load?
Mm-hmm. And move to ease and flow.
Amen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yeah.
That sounds
Yeah.
good to me. I'll go there.
Well,
Ease has been the word that I've been kind of like, ease is the word that really resonates with me lately. And I just want to say that on the license plate on my car, I made it personalized. It's flowing. So ease and flow, I'm all with you.
good.
Sometimes there's good days and sometimes there's bad, but that's the lighthouse I'm going towards, you know.
Oh, on those days you can always say ease and flow. Where did you go?
Where are you?
Come back, come back.
Come back, ease and flow.
I guess I better get myself to the yoga mat.
Yeah, there you go. It's true.
Well, I loved the part in your book where you were saying the doing mind softens into the being mind. Do you want to tell our audience more about that, Paul?
I believe that's where grace lives, in the being. I come from a place where a sense of self-worth was always taught by what you accomplished and the amount of doing that you would achieve. And if we're seeking balance within life, finding time to slow down and to be actually creates space to be with what is. And sometimes being with what is not easy, but it creates a sense of not running. There's a sense of, in the stillness, sometimes it's like, in the stillness, there can be peace, but sometimes we have to kind of sit in it and allow it to open ourselves up. Now, I am a person that focuses on both. There is ways that I can be and sit within it, and I am a big believer that healing needs movement. And so I have gone through many silent meditational retreats. I'm going to one next week for a few days, and sitting and being with it is not an easy thing for me, but it's one of the doorways for me to help me to find peace. And I recognize that, as meditation is important, a sense of being and doing something within this moving meditation is also something that is important too. So I actually think that both are important, but when I sense that sense of being, there is a place of like accepting where you're at and what you're going through. And it doesn't mean you have to like it, but there is a shift that can happen when we, in a compassionate space, just be. And when in grief, it's not easy. Of course, why would we want to go there? That seems to be where the pain is, And for some people who are like, I'm afraid if I were to do that, I might cry and I might stop crying. I couldn't stop crying. And I have found that I believe that grief, it doesn't need a lot of time. It needs concentrated time. And so if we allow ourselves concentrated time to be with the sadness, it can create a shift, just as we create concentrated time to just be and maybe sit with what is. I think that that's where sometimes the pain is, and it can also be where the healing is.
Mhm. So what I'm hearing is what I've said so often: take time to grieve every day.
I think it's, if you have the time and if you are able and you can carve out those specific moments to do it, I think it's a wonderful thing. I think a little bit about just find a sense of allowing of whatever needs to come through today. And if that's sadness, let that be sadness. If that's whatever it is, can you allow what is? And if you can find those moments to take time to grieve, and especially if you're going through a recent loss, to take that time can actually, you know, whether it's writing a letter to someone your heart loves and misses, maybe it's even just taking time to, you know, place the hands on the heart and take a moment and remember someone that your heart misses. I think that whatever you can allow yourself, whether that be a minute or 5 minutes, a class, whatever that is, I do think, I think that's where the love is. And so I think that carving out those times is sacred.
It is indeed. And it's sacred not only for the person, the pet, the dream that's lost, it's sacred for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It again, it reminds us and helps us to see what's important in our life.
Yes.
It's our wake-up call to say, that's what's important. Little things that can distract us, those aren't the really important things. These are the things that are important in it. It's our wake-up call. It's our wake-up call.
And in many ways, grief is that wake-up call.
Yeah.
Really
it's a hard one. It's a hard wake-up call.
And as we've said before, you know, unbidden, nobody says, oh, I'll volunteer for grief.
Right.
You know, I'll volunteer for the loss and the subsequent grief. And one of the things that, so two questions came to me as you were speaking. And one is, would you like to demonstrate a particular move that is often a catalyst for allowing sadness to move through? And the other thing that came up for me was, tell us more about the cycles of compassionate transformation. So I'm going to invite you to choose where you want to take us next, Paul.
Yeah. Let me share with you a little bit about the cycle of compassionate transformation. And to honor what you're seeking, I'll show you like little techniques that can be a part of it, that you can see that can help to shift things, whatever the struggle is. Okay?
Good. Okay.
All right. So the first step that we focus on a little bit is on awareness. What awareness is the first step within this cycle of compassionate transformation. It helps us to deepen our breath, to quiet our mind, and to gently move the body. So I'm going to just take a moment and I'm just going to focus on breath. I'm going to actually focus on, this is actually, let me just share with you these. These are resources here to support you if you're ever feeling overwhelmed, or even if you're working with someone who is overwhelmed. These can be a life raft that you can constantly come back to support you, okay? So the first thing I'm going to invite you to do is just take a moment and notice where you're feeling grounded. And that can literally be you feel your toes touching the earth, or you feel your sit bones in your chair. Just take a moment and notice, where are you connected to the earth? Then I'm going to invite you next to connect to your breath. Just begin to notice your breath without changing it or altering it. Just become aware of it. See if you can even perhaps deepen it. And if you're able, I invite you to place your hands on your belly as a way of centering and encouraging the breath to come all the way down into the belly. Notice as you inhale, your belly expand with air, and as you exhale, observe it contract. Now I'll come back to those resources to support us, and just so for you, when you are feeling overwhelmed or anxious, or if you're working with someone who is, just remember these things: the foundation, breath, and centering always can be a little bit of our life raft when the waters start to become a little too overwhelming. First off, I'm going to just invite you to place your hands on your chest and on your heart. It's where love can live, and it can be where also grief and loss can live. And if you're comfortable, I invite you to just maybe take a moment and gaze down or close your eyes if you're able. And to just connect to, is there someone your heart loves and misses? And as you notice your breath, maybe just see that person in your mind's eye. And if you'd like to say someone's name here out loud, I invite you to say that person's name. Ella. Breathe. You're welcome to release your hands down by your sides, by your knees. In honor of what we were talking about, what we're doing within that space is a place of being. But now let's focus on something that we can do. Now, here's the thing. Grief and trauma can impact our spine. So let's just find a way to connect to our breath as we just gently begin to move the spine to get into the body. So if you are seated in a chair, maybe move a little forward on your chair. If you're listening to this and aren't able to do it, just start to get curious about your body. But I'm going to invite you to just start to create circles around with your torso, just like large circles with your torso as you notice your breath. And if you're listening to this, I invite you to create large circles within your torso, or just start to get curious about sensations within your body and what feels right to move here in your body. Maybe create large circles now in the other way. Watch her and notice your breath here. And slowly, when you're ready, come back to center. Take a moment and breathe. I invite you to bring your hands right to your side. So what we're doing, just so you know, in awareness, it's about deepening our breath and finding safe ways to move into the body. That's the intention of what we're doing here. And so with your hands at your sides, inhale through your nose, lift your arms up over your head. Yeah, and then exhale, palms down. Feel yourself grounded. Yes, good. Continue at your own pace. Inhale through your nose, lift the arms up. Exhale, palms down, feel yourself grounded. Now you may be like, well, why am I doing this? The intention is to deepen your breath. And the intention is to slowly begin to get into the body. Inhale up. And exhale, slowly bringing it down. Good. Just take a moment and breathe here for a moment. Now there's many techniques within awareness that I can go into, but I'm going to start to show you a little bit how the cycle begins to work. And then the next step we take within the cycle is a technique that's called expression. Now, expression is about using movement, breath, and sound to begin to shift and release whatever the struggle is and the pain is, okay? Now, part of using sound is vocalization, because sometimes we might have a hard time sharing or talking about where we're feeling stuck, okay? So let's go back to those resources that support us. Feeling grounded. Feel yourself grounded. Feel yourself in your chair. Come back to your breath. But this time I invite you to, again, bring your hands right to your belly, but You can also bring fists to the belly. Again, this is a way of centering, but we're going to start to play around with breath and sound. This technique is called cannon breath. I'm going to invite you to inhale 3 inhales through your nose and then exhale out your mouth and start to play a little bit with vocalization and sound. I'll demonstrate. Inhale through the nose. And then I'm going to exhale out the mouth with a little sigh. I invite you to give it a try here. Inhale. Exhale. Good. One more time. Exhale. Good. Just take a moment and shake it out. Now you're like, why are we doing this? How is this helping with grief and loss? When we deepen our breath, it allows us to feel deeply, okay? And sometimes within grief, our breath becomes very shallow. So if we're going to take time to begin to shift and move pain through, we have to be centered and we have to begin to learn how to use the breath and movement in empowering ways. Take, for instance, let's say you're feeling very angry and irritable, and let's say just things are overwhelming to you. This is a technique called punching out. I invite you to bring fists right to your chest and just start to get curious about here. What's this struggle or this tension or maybe this anger or pain? And just start to imagine that you're holding it with tight fists right in front of your chest. We started to begin to use this a little bit as fuel. I invite you to just begin to punch out in front of you, but this time use equal inhalation and exhalation through your mouth, like good. And you're just beginning to just punch out in front of you, creating a little bit of a spark within. You can go slow or you can go fast. I invite you to keep going here for 3 more times. 2 and 1. Now hold the fists very tight in front of your chest. Now we're going to start to begin to channel it out. Take a deep inhale, and then with one hand, release it out and release it with the hand with a like you're pushing it away and releasing it. And then the fists come in, and then with the other hand, release it in front of you. Yeah, and then in and release in front of you. And one more time. In, release in front of you. Good. Just take a moment and shake it out through the hands, shaking it out. So you'll start to see a little bit here. What's happening is we're starting to begin to move what is suppressed through. That's a little bit about what the intention is within expression. Like another technique that you can begin to do, and then I'll start moving more through the cycle, is there is a technique that's called the wood chopper. And the wood chopper imagines you're holding a very strong and powerful axe, and there's a piece of wood that you're going to chop. I'll demonstrate here, and you're welcome to do it with me. Again, these are powering ways to start to take whatever is suppressed and move it through. So I invite you to interlace your fingers together, and they're right in front of you, okay? And then bring it in front of you and imagine that you've got a very powerful divine axe. It's not meant to hurt or harm. It's just meant to chop a piece of wood that's in front of you. Inhale through your nose and lift your arms up as if you were lifting that divine axe above you. And then exhale and just bring it down and chop the wood in front of you. Good. Again, inhale, lifting it up and then chopping the wood in front of you. Good. One more time. Up and then chop. Good. Go ahead and release that down. Let's take a moment and come back to those resources that are here again to support you. Feel yourself grounded. Notice your breath. Just take a moment here and breathe. And And there's many different ways to begin to take the pain and move it through. Those are just a couple of demonstrations. But what we're trying to do in some ways within this work is we're slowly beginning to peel back the layers. What's beneath that pain and that struggle? And perhaps whatever that is, maybe that is a little bit of sadness. And perhaps that's also love. So the next step that I would guide someone in within this cycle of compassionate transformation is what's called connection. Connection can be within ourselves, connection can be with others, connection can be to spirit. So let's first start a little bit with that connection to ourselves. I invite you to bring your hands right to your chest. Just like we started off with that hands at the heart dedication, but can you just begin to circle it around, a little bit around your chest here as you breathe? Notice your breath here, and if there's somebody that you said somebody's name here out loud that your heart loves and misses, as you circle, if you want to say that person's name here or remember that person, you're welcome to do that here. Hello. I invite you to just bring your hands to opposite arms. Just give yourself a little squeeze here, as if you were offering yourself a little bit of an embrace here. Let's take a moment and find a sense of connection to others. And I invite you to just bring your hands right out in front of you as if you were just holding an empty plate in front of your chest. This technique is called the appreciation meditation. Perhaps just take a moment and close your eyes. And if you said somebody's name, can you take a moment and remember something that you're grateful for about that person? Maybe it was a memory, or maybe it was a quality of who they were. Can you see something specific about that? Take a moment and place your hands right to your chest and to your heart. Just say the words here, thank you. Let's take a moment and bring the hands back out. And can we connect to someone outside of ourselves that supports us, especially in times where we're struggling the most? Take a moment and can you remember and connect to maybe a person that supports you? It could be a pet, could be a friend, someone who supports you when you're hurting. Bring the hands right to the chest and to the heart and just say the words here, thank you. This next technique within connection is just like wings of grace. Just bring your hands right to your sides. Just inhale, let your wings float up by your sides. And exhale, let them float down. Yeah, keep going here and just find a sense of grace and ease as the hands flow up. And exhale, have the hands float down. We'll do one more here, but this time I'm going to invite you to open your chest and open your heart. Lift your wings up. And now I invite you to bring your elbows down and just begin to open your chest and open your heart space. Yeah, that's it. Good. Just hold here for one moment. Take a deep inhale. Exhale, open your chest and open your heart. Yeah, there you go. Good. Then slowly bring your hands down by your sides. And then to close out the cycle, what I'm going to focus on now is a place of surrender. And surrender is about softening the body. It's about not letting go of love, but beginning to just self-regulate and begin to soften the body. And you know what a good one to do within that? It's just a forward fold. So if you're seated in your chair, wherever you are, take a moment and connect to the resource of, again, that grounding and foundation. And begin to fold forward here. My chest is going towards my thighs. And just begin to fold forward here and breathe. And see if you can begin to soften and surrender just one little part of your body. Maybe it's a finger, maybe it's your neck or your head. Keep focusing on the resource of your breath as you just begin to soften your body. And slowly, when you're ready, begin to roll up one vertebra at a time. Take your time. And I'm going to close out this little experience with a sound that stimulates the vagus nerve that allows the body to rest and digest. And it's a bumblebee meditation, and all you have to do is you hum like a little bumblebees in your head. It's deepening your breath, and it's just allowing your whole nervous system to just rest and digest. The way you do it is you inhale through your nose and then just hum, and like a little bumblebees in your head. Let's give it a try. I'll invite us to do it 3 times here. Take a deep inhale. You can play with tone if you'd like. Let's do it again. Notice your breath. Good. We just went through a little bit of a mini cycle. We just got safe in our body. We began to move some struggle out. We started to find connection of things that support us. And then we began to soften. That's a little bit of what we're doing within this cycle of compassionate transformation. Now there's another step that I go to in after this, where it goes into after this loss, where can we tap into perseverance or purpose or play, and how that can get trickled in within it. But I just wanted to give a little bit of an experience of like how this process works.
Thank you, Paul. Your voice is so soothing. You are so clear. And my curiosity is, what is the age range of people that have experienced this grief yoga with you? And then I'll tell you why I'm asking.
I think that the age range can go from anywhere probably 30 to 80. I mean, it's, I know that's a large, but I think that people that I teach this to kids. I think that they teach it to teenagers. I actually think that this type of practice works for any age because we're all kind of struggling in our own way. But I've noticed that from my sense, probably the age range that seems to come a lot are probably people who are between the ages of 40 and 70. I would say a lot of women come to this practice because I think that they're open to going into their grief. Sometimes men are they come from their doing place. Trust me, I know. So that's what I've noticed.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So what I heard you say is some of the grief yoga teachers that you've certified then are teaching this to children and to teenagers as well.
They do.
Got it.
They do.
Thank you. Thank you. And the reason that I asked is that I was working with a corporate client this morning. It was a coaching session. It wasn't about grief. And something came up and I thought, oh, this could be so appropriate for their child.
Absolutely.
So that's it. And it was the chopping with the axe.
Right. Yeah. Well, there's gosh, I have techniques within the book where it's literally like have a little temper tantrum, like a child would. And that's why sometimes this works with kids too, because they might not have the words to talk and describe about what it is. And so we're using movement, breath, and sound to begin to shift it. So yeah, that's why the kids resonate with it.
Yes. Well, today our guest has been Paul Denniston, who is the founder of Grief Yoga and the author of Healing Through Yoga, Transform Loss into Empowerment. And Paul, I want to thank you so much today for being here with us, bringing your loving, powerful presence.
Oh, you're sweet. Thank you. Well, also, if you're talking about the book, if you want a free class that comes with the purchase of the book, which I think the book is like $6 on Amazon. So it is. It's very. I know it's crazy, but you can get a free course with it when you go to healingthrough-yoga.com. So you can have free classes that can support the book experience too. So just putting that out there.
So say that again. Go
healingthrough-yoga.com. If you go there, it'll show you where you can purchase the book, like on Amazon, and then it can get you access to the free classes to support the book experience.
Good. So that will be in Paul's biography below, and then we'll have that link there for all of you to make it really, really easy. So once again, Paul, thank you so very, very much for being here with us today. You are a gift.
You're a special little light in this world too. So thank you for letting me come into this space. I appreciate it.
Oh, I'm so delighted you could. Thank you. Bye-bye.